Welcome to Seed to Exit, the podcast where we uncover the stories, strategies, and insights that power the startup ecosystem. I'm your host, Reese Keck, founder of MindHire, a talent acquisition firm specializing in helping startups build exceptional teams. Each week, I sit down with founders, investors, and industry leaders to explore the journeys behind iconic companies and game-changing ideas. Whether you're building, investing, or just curious about what it takes to succeed in the startup world, I want this podcast to be your go-to resource for actionable insights and inspiring conversations. Now, if you enjoy the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with your network. Your support means the world and really helps bring more incredible conversations to life. Callie, thanks for coming on. Excited to have you.
Welcome, Reese. Good to be here.
All right. Well, I'm excited for this one. Obviously, I love talking to CEOs of venture-backed companies, but this one is near and dear to my heart because of what you guys do and my own personal background of being homeschooled, which is of course a slightly different model than what you're doing over at Prenda, but obviously I have a lot of relatability to it. So I'm excited to dig into this with you.
Sure. This is going to be fun.
It is. All right. So tell me about Prenda. I've of course looked at the website and have
Yeah.
done my own research, but for the listeners who haven't had the chance, take it away.
Prenda helps people open and run great micro schools. Micro school, if you haven't heard of this yet, is a small group. It's micro. It's 5, 10 kids meeting in person. Typically, it's in an informal space like a home or a community center or a church. So a small group of people, one adult who really knows those kids, cares about them, and helps them become what we call empowered learners. Helps them really take ownership of learning and get into it in a way that maybe wouldn't happen in a traditional classroom.
How did you come up with the idea? How did you launch?
So I have kids of my own, 4 of them, and as every parent does, we had these conversations. What do you do? What's the right choice for your kids, and how can we support them? I had seen my kids gradually get to a place where they were really doing fine in school as far as all the metrics go, but engagement was dying out gradually. I mean, really saw the light go out in their eyes. They weren't excited to be there. They weren't curious like they were when they started life. They wanted to learn everything and understand everything, and traditional school for them was kind of gradually beating it out of them, so to speak. And I think that happens for a lot of kids and for a lot of different reasons. Meanwhile, I had been volunteering at the public library, teaching kids computer programming. And as I watched these kids in an after school environment really catch fire and just be excited about learning and capable of doing all kinds of cool things, I thought, what's the disconnect? Why do these same kids do so well in this environment and not very well in a traditional classroom environment? And that's when I started to ask, some of those bigger, more dangerous questions. What if we did the structure differently? What I found is interesting. The ideas for changing education have actually existed for a really long time, and you'll find great educators doing really everything we're doing in our micro schools. Many of the educators that we meet today say, I wish I was allowed to do this as a public school educator. So it's just really giving permission to innovation and doing education in a different way.
And how old were your kids when you realized that they were starting to lose interest in more traditional schooling?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. A lot of the research shows, I didn't have this research at the time, but it shows fifth grade is kind of one of those spots where it starts to die out. And my son was a fifth grader when I pulled him out to do our micro school.
Okay. So you came up with the idea, but then how did we get from maybe we can do things differently to actually launching Prenda and then growing to where it's at today?
Well, it put me in a funny spot, right? When I thought, okay, we could do this differently, I ran a micro school in my house. I was the learning guide, so that the primary educator for these kids with no expertise, teaching degree, any sort of background that anybody should, acknowledge as qualifying me to do this. So it was like, if I can do this, and really did put together a learning model that had kids working at their own pace through online curriculum, but doing a lot of creative projects in small groups and then meeting together once a day to do things in a Socratic way, hands-on science experiments, things like that. My role was different than a teacher. I wasn't writing lesson plans and grading papers. I was definitely facilitating, coaching, mentoring, supporting these kids, and it worked. And so I got to see these kids go from disengaged to engaged, hate school to love school, and seeing that change happen for them. Their parents noticed it too, and I recognized, like, yes, it happened to be me, but I actually believe there's people, lots of people out there that would do a much better job than what I did as a facilitator for a micro school. And that was kind of the magic moment where we started offering this up and allowing other people to do it, personal friends at first, and then that expanded and grew. And we've since helped over 1,000 people start microschools.
How did you convince those original few people to take the leap into becoming the not only enrolling their own kids, but also becoming the guides, as you call them?
Yeah, well, you study startups. I mean, early adopters don't actually need a ton of convincing. These are people who are very aware of the problems. In some cases, that came from a parent perspective, right? You've seen your own child struggle, right? If your child is, I'm thinking of some of these early folks, if their child is advanced academically and they're just bored out of their mind, every day is just a chore. It's like forcing that kid to go sit in a class that you know is not engaging his or her brain, and they don't want to go. You feel that as a parent, right? And you're saying, what can I do for this kid differently? A lot of the folks that we worked with in the beginning were really on the verge of homeschool. They're thinking about taking it to that next level and saying, all right, could I be responsible for the entirety of my child's education? And that feels like a pretty big lift. A lot of people have concerns. What if I do it wrong? I want my kid to be around other kids. It's a lot of work, am I going to be able to have a life or sanity homeschooling, right? And so if homeschooling's out there as this possible solution, I think a lot of people say, well, if I could get the benefits of that, but still have some normalcy, some structure, some, standards aligned curriculum, a group of kids that's meeting together, an adult in the room that's trained and paid and understands what to do. um, that's a nice compromise, right? You get the good parts about homeschool and the good parts about traditional school. You're still able to do education in a way that's very student led, that opens up kids' minds and really captures their imagination. But you don't have to do it all alone with your own kids. So that's that trade-off. And we found those people. In fact, I would say they found us. We grew very quickly before COVID, and then of course COVID came along and shut down all the schools. And by that point, it was the only option really was to try to get a micro school going. So a lot of people did it in 2020, 2021.
Right. Yeah. What was COVID like for you in that couple of years?
Insanity. I
I can
mean,
imagine.
yeah, you get these feelings like people are just beating down your door, like, please let us start a micro school. The organization wasn't equipped, wasn't set up. We didn't have our software wasn't built to the maturity level that it is today. We didn't have things sorted. But we wanted to help and accommodate. So we did a lot of work to just try to be there for folks. Probably in retrospect, like said yes too much. Like we could have said no more often. Of course, a lot of those folks, when school reopened, they went back to traditional school. And so it
Mhm.
left us in an awkward spot as an organization too. And we had to adapt to that. But putting that all together, I mean, it definitely changed the way, I would say changed forever, the way parents think about their kids' education. And it made all of us recognize, like, hey, we need to wake up on this and be involved and really be an agent and a chooser in how education works, as opposed to just passively, shipping your kid off and hoping that everything turns out okay.
Are you thinking about yourself more as an alternative to homeschooling or more as an alternative to public school?
These days, the number's slightly more towards public school. I mean, people are coming to us from a more traditional, whether that's a district school, a charter school, a private school. Um, every kid's different, right? And so the right solution, is going to depend on the kid. What we see is, probably something like 60, 70% of the kids that come in today to Prenda are coming from something more traditional. And then there's still a good contingent, 30, 40% that are homeschool. We get a lot of, we call homeschool-ish families, right? People who have maybe done it for 1 year and then went back, have thought about doing it, but haven't yet pulled the trigger. They're doing all the research. They're thinking about all the things. And, for one reason or another, it's not their core identity or their way of life. Like you definitely meet the all-in homeschoolers who are just like, this is what we're doing, K through 12, like you're going to be homeschooled. And oftentimes that's motivated by something really deep. And sometimes those people don't even like micro schools, right? They say, we've got this covered. Thank you very much. But there are a lot of other people that are like, I see the benefits of that, but I don't know if I want to go all in on it. And for those people, micro schools are a great solution.
Why do kids, when to go back briefly to the when we talked about, the kind of delight going out in your little guy's eyes when he was in fifth grade, why does that happen, in your opinion, in public schools?
Well, you could ask psychologists. There's this thing called self-determination theory. And it's the same three kinds of things that Dan Pink has written about. There's a book called Drive about what motivates humans. There's basically three things you need, and one of them's connection with other people. Specifically for a child, it's connection with an adult who cares about you and sees you and knows you. The structures that we have in place today in public education they're definitely not designed around connection. In some ways, they thwart it or undermine the ability to actually connect. I mean, imagine a junior high teacher with literally 120 kids that they're trying to know by name, and to know their names at all is one thing, and then to know anything about them or to feel any sort of genuine connection, it's mathematically impossible, right? And so to get 10 kids and an adult that really cares about them, we really try to solve for connection in these micro schools. So make an explicit focus on this, both in who the guide is, in why the parents choose the guide, and then also how the guide operates. Connection is just one piece of it. Another one's mastery. So humans of all ages, want to win, right? We want to like take on a challenge, learn it, get good at it, feel competent in it. Some of the researchers will call this competency or competence. And that's important to people, right? And I think there's this sense in schools where we've got this kind of cheap counterfeit to that, grades and test scores and some of these structures. But I think if you're an unaware, I maybe call it a cynical kid like I was, you see through it. It's like, I know how to get an A. I know how to get the test score. It's not really competence for me. It's not really mastery. I'm not learning. In fact, my whole goal, unfortunately, I've seen this over and over again, kids that are, taking a test on the red badge of courage, and the whole game is to read the, summary notes online as quick as possible, get the information into their head and keep it just long enough to do well on the quiz and then forget it all like it never happened. And it's like,
Yeah, it's
that's
cramming.
not learning. All of us know that. That's not learning, right? So that's another reason. I mean, it's disengaging to feel like you're playing some sort of sham game. And then the last one is maybe the most important one. It's hard to choose between these. They're all three very important, but it's about autonomy, just making choices for yourself. I mean, there were so many times in my experience through school where it would have been very easy to just say, write about something that's interesting to you. And instead, it's no, here's the assignment. You have to write about, what I want you to write about. And it becomes this formula and this game of like just meeting the rubric and kind of playing by the compliance, just jumping through compliance hoops. Um, Kids, I mean, they're humans. They are. So to treat a kid like a human and to honor agency, to honor autonomy, to give them opportunities for mastery, and to do it in an environment that's connected. I mean, those are the kinds of things that are the problems, but they also thankfully stand out as solutions. And it's allowed us to have just great success, great experiences doing micro schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not really any secret that the public school system, although there certainly are exceptions, isn't generally a great one. What's your opinion on just why it is the way it is?
I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think so much of this, was well-meaning, and it came about in you really trace some of this back to Horace Mann visiting Prussia in 1843. It goes back a while. There was a time where information was a scarce resource, and so you needed somebody who knew the information so they could stand up and deliver the information to the kids so that they would learn the information, right? That's no longer the world we live in. That's been outdated by just the change in information availability and the information age. So now it's much more about how do you unlock a human for learning, and our system's just it's not set up with that in mind. It was designed around different goals, and so adapting and doing things differently. Now you do see it, like there are classroom teachers who have figured these things out. I remember doing a Socratic discussion in seventh grade. I was in a honors social studies class or something, and my teacher went to some sort of convention and we did a Socratic discussion. It really like stood out to me as one of the great educational moments of my life. Part of why it did was literally the only one that I can remember doing, right? The whole time I was in school. So it's like we had that one beautiful day. So you do see people that are trying inside of the system. But often, you talk to teachers, they're busy. They've got a whole list of things that they have to deliver, the standards they need to push onto kids, and it kind of gets in the way of, engaging with those ideas of connection and autonomy and mastery.
Okay. So we've built a system off of a hierarchy or paradigm that's really no longer, as relevant in today's society. So if you were to wave a magic wand and fix things, whether that be making adjustments to the current system or tearing it all down and building something new in its place,
Yeah.
that be? Would everybody be doing micro schools? Is there something you'd change within the way things are currently done?
Yeah, I think what I would do is make a micro school available to everyone. I mean, basically, what we see even among micro schools, there are different specialties, different focuses, different approaches. Some of the guides are soft and nurturing. Some of the guides are a little cold, prickly, but like push you to be your best. There's different ways to do all of these things, and more options to meet the needs of a very diverse group of kids is really what it's all about. And frankly, I have a lot of friends that still work really hard to make public school districts work well and to improve them. I feel proud of the work they're doing. I feel like we're all in it together. So it's not like I would blow anything up. I think what I would do is just say, hey, here are options. And I think more options is generally better because kids are different and families have different priorities. And I do talk to parents that are like, you know what? Yeah, I hear you about engagement and autonomy, but like I want my kid to be like in the normal thing that everybody else is doing, and I don't want to do a micro school right now. And to me, that's adoption curve and it's perspectives, and you have to honor that as well. So yeah, with agency as such an important piece, I would never force everyone to do micro schools, but I think the existence of micro schools and as people hear about them and find the benefits of it, what you're seeing is it kind of pushes the whole system to think harder about just innovating and providing more options for kids.
So what does a day in the life actually look like for a apprentice student? We understand the format, small group,
Yeah.
guided by an adult, but what do they do all day?
So Prenda Micro School, I'll go quickly through this because I know we're short on time, but
We got time.
there are there are four learning modes in the day. So the first one's called Connect. Picture a 20-minute kind of mini activity that's focused explicitly on the mindsets and the kind of purpose-driven thinking. It's really about who you're becoming as a learner. That's a short, group activity. We typically have a couple hours of Conquer mode. Conquer is where kids set their own goals. They are working on math and English and anything else you want to work on. You'll see kids with art goals or coding goals or writing different pieces of their academic mastery, and they're really just tackling it one lesson at a time, taking little assessments, learning from their results, consuming tutorials and things like that. um, that piece of the day is followed by collaborate mode. And collaborate is all about get the whole group together, engage in a Socratic way. It's really trying to drive inquiry is what the experts will call this. So just getting kids curious, getting them thinking, and you can picture researching together aspects of an ancient society, or producing a play or some other sort of work of literature, doing science experiments together. So that's the collaborate mode. And then create mode is, typically two or three kids working together on a project. And so you'll have a room of a lot of engagement. Kids are working on different pieces of, different projects, or maybe the same project, but they're doing it in different ways. So a lot of choices in there as well. And the idea is just to have kids as engaged as we possibly can so that they're, actively making the choice and becoming learners.
The different learning modalities sound great. How many subjects do they study on a given day?
It's the same subjects. We just don't organize the day. So there will be, typically you'll have a math goal, for example, but then there may be math as part of your collaborate activity. And if your, create project later in the day is about, one of them is making a little water bottle business, right? There's
Mhm.
like spreadsheet math that kids are doing, even young kids, where they're calculating profit margins and figuring out how many will they have to sell to break even on their inventory costs. And so, you'll see math in all of the modalities, reading, writing, obviously really important so many facets of learning. So it's not really like, okay, everybody, now we're reading. It's like we're doing this activity and using literacy and numeracy as part of that is kind of the flow.
So a lot of this sounds service-based. Where does the technology come into it?
Yeah, so the business really exists to help people start their own micro schools. I would say there's two problems that somebody has if they're trying to start a micro school. One of them is business related. It's just like, how do you actually start your own little school? And we help people market themselves, put up a website for them. That's a whole software product that we provide. We also help them with the payments system. So we're, invoicing parents on their behalf, collecting the funding. Um, Often from state entities, there's kind of a regulatory component to this when there's funding available for school choice. Um, there's also, I'm trying to think of the other kind of business services. There's a huge contingent around learning and development, which is typically done more in a service-based way. Those other pieces are, hard software. The other big problem that people have is running the learning model. So, we've put this learning model together, but there's also a web app that the kids log into and the guide has an admin view, and they really are able to operate a fully, a complete curriculum, a complete learning model that will help kids, hit all the main points. And we've built in, kind of measurement and communication back to parents as part of that. So the parents can see like, okay, I know my kid loves school, but what are they doing all day? Right? And
Yep.
it's important to be able to show like, here's your goal in English, here's where you're at today, um, and we're tracking progress, over time. So those types of things are all built into our, software platform as
And then
well.
are the guides creating their own curriculum, or is there a standard Prenda curriculum
We
like?
provide a curriculum out of the box. Now, what you find is because kids are different and guides are different, everybody kind of wants to tailor it and tinker with it. So we give them a lot of flexibility. It's like, here's something that will work. You start there and then you adapt it over time. I was visiting a guide this week that's in her fifth year. She does things, she uses Prenda pieces and really holds the same structure that we've provided, but she's filled in a lot of the pieces with other things. Either she's created them herself or she's pulled from other places.
Gotcha. Now, you don't require the guides to have teaching credentials, which I can see the argument for, but then also at the same time, if they're responsible for the education of the kids, I could see a concern around why they don't have one. So what was the reasoning behind that decision, and how do you handle it when a kid, let's says, "Hey, I'm having a trouble with this eighth grade math problem," and one would hope the guide would help them, but maybe they can't. What do we do then?
Yeah, so I think it's important to just reframe it at the very beginning as this isn't a traditional teacher-led classroom. So I think the picture most of us have in mind, I mean, maybe not you because you've homeschooled, but
Yeah.
most people picture sitting passively while school is sort of done to them, right? And the
Yep.
teacher's job is to, quote, do school to you. Like, I will school you. So I will stand up here and tell you stuff, and then I will give you homework and assignments to see if you understand it, and then test you ultimately and put a grade in a grade book. That whole model is flipped on its head here. So it's really about providing the kids with a path forward. I can give an example of this. So one thing we have is called there's goal setting, right? So in Conquer mode, you'll have a goal for math and a goal for language at least, and you often will choose other goals that you'll add to that. When you set a goal, you basically start the year with an assessment and we say, here's where you're at. This is information for your own good. It's not for us to like measure you or brag about our school or anything. It's just like, here's the current reality of where you are today on language and on math. And then from that data point, we have what's called the GPS meeting, the guide, parent, student. And these three sit together. We provide training for how to do this, as well as a software interface that guides the conversation. So this meeting is really important because it's both a kind of hard look at where the kid currently is and an ambitious kind of forward look at where they could be or where they want to be by the end. We give the kid a chance to, identify a long-term goal. Like by the end of this school year, yeah, I'm currently, I'm a fourth grader and I'm currently testing at like halfway through third grade math. Like I understand some of third grade, but not all. So I'm not completely up to grade level. What we're going to say is we're definitely going to go back and make sure you're full on third grade. And you've got time through this year to progress. So you could set a goal to be finished with fourth grade math by the end of the year. That would be a what we'd call like a 1.5 grade level goal, right? But for the whole school year. Well, what we do from there is our software will break that up, given the academic calendar of the year, we'll break that up for you and it'll say, okay, every day that you're in school, you need to do this many lessons, master this much content, and then track it. We have integrations built to these various like third-party ed tech tools that we're working with. So we're tracking their progress as they go through the year. So it becomes it is a very deeply human experience. Obviously, this is about a kid feeling empowered and able to kind of set a goal and tackle it. What we do though is really try to provide all the tools so that it's a very scalable experience. It doesn't require some sort of special expertise on the kid's part or the parent's part or the guide's part. We can put this all together. So we see this happening in micro schools all over the country. In fact, the average goal that's set is 1.8 grade levels in a year. So you see kids really shooting for the stars in the sense that, if you were sitting in a regular fourth grade class, the goal implied, the goal given to you would be 1.0. You're going to finish fourth grade math,
Right.
regardless of where you started and regardless of how fast you're understanding it. And we see these kids set big goals. They don't achieve them all the way. The average, final outcome is about 1.3 to 1.5, but that's mastery data and it's more than what kids would have got in a traditional classroom. So we feel excited about it.
That's great. Yeah, because I mean, in traditional classrooms, I mean, you have the No Child Left Behind, which got implemented in 2001, which at the time obviously had a very noble goal, but I think it backfired in a lot of ways in the sense that you now move at the pace of the slowest student. And so kind of to the detriment to everyone else. And so essentially under your model, kids can move at their own pace. So you're calling it 1 to 3, 1 to 5. So currently you have grades K through 8. So does that mean that I could then theoretically finish eighth grade at an age when I might be in like sixth or seventh grade?
Yeah, see it all the time.
Okay. And then how do you and so then are we having 11-year-olds going into high school or what happens in that that delta?
Yeah, there is definitely an interface, I guess, at the end of Prenda. So when you finish Prenda, we go K through 8. Typically kids will either choose there's different paths that you can take, right? So some of them will choose a traditional path. They'll say, I want to go to a regular high school, kind of participate. For that kid, it's often driven by kind of the community and the social aspect of just being part of kind of normalcy. I mean, this is true for my own kids. They went to a more traditional high school. And what they want to do is, my son's in student council, he plays in the band, there's, music and involved in the dances and the community. That's fine. It's a trade-off. Like some of the material academically is review for him, I guess, to say the least. I think there's often times where um, he does find individual teachers within those systems that, kind of encourage him to like think outside the box and he'll engage in sort of different conversations, just hypotheticals. This is a kid that likes to sit around and debate philosophy and things like that. This is the same kid that was in that first micro school. Now he's a
Okay.
senior.
Nice.
Um, I mean, just one of these people, right? That like knows how to hang with adults and kind of take ownership of his own. But he definitely has classes that he's playing the game, right? He's just sort of, I'll do whatever I need to get an A and then move on. So I think fortunately for him and for all of us, you can get to this point where you're an empowered learner and you kind of know how to really take ownership of your learning. And then an empowered learner can function in a variety of situations. We do have other kids that, have different goals. So if somebody's really about maybe a single topic, I've met some kids that get into like, tech, for example. I want to learn ins and outs of full stack software development. Like those kids might do some sort of online program or homeschool so they have plenty of extra time to just dive all the way in to their field. But academically, it's really not an issue. Eighth grade doesn't quote count. It's not on the high school transcripts. We have kids that will go test into a higher math class or something like that, but you're treated the same as really if you had homeschooled or done anything else, kind of coming into the traditional system as a high schooler.
And is that why you stopped at grade 8 just because of the issues of the official high school transcript, or what was the reason
Part
behind that?
Yeah, kind of three reasons. I mean, one is just resources. We wanted to really focus and do well the piece that we do. It is a different world in high school.
Yeah.
One of them is regulatory, just these rules and thinking about interfacing now with colleges. It's like a different kind of a full different game we would have to build out. And the third one is, I just kind of alluded to this, but the market's different. People have different things. I think we probably will provide high school at some point, but we've just been so focused on getting K through 8 right. So that's why we're there right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's sort of funny. That's in a way what happened to me with some of the issues with the transcripts. So I've mentioned this to you, and it's been mentioned a couple times throughout this. So I was homeschooled for a lot of the reasons that you've kind of shared, with some skepticism around the quality of public education. And it's funny, my parents, neither of them went to college. And so it's not like they were educators that knew everything that they were doing and came in. It was primarily my mom who did it. But it was very much a self-paced, self-taught, when I was younger, she would help out with the math problems and what have you. But by the time it got to like sixth grade and any sort of geometry or algebra, it's like, no, you're on your own. Like, read the book, figure it out. Which is what I did. And then I did do the first couple of years in high school, homeschooled, went to public school in my junior year. But then that is when the issue with the transcripts came up, is I
Mm.
had a 4.25 GPA my junior year. So clearly something on the homeschooling side went right. Uh,
Right.
but then when I went back to do my course planning for my senior year, they told me, well, your first 2 years of high school weren't from an accredited institution, so you can come back for your senior year, but you can't walk, you can't graduate, you can't do anything like that. So I finished up the year, just tested out, did the not the GED, but I think they called it in California the high school equivalent degree, and I was done.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
interesting way of doing things for sure.
Well, and it's funny, right? Because you think about what that means, like that test, if that test in fact means you have the knowledge that society has deemed important for a high school graduate to have.
Yeah.
My son, the same son, kind of a smart aleck, he took the GED test just for fun, like 2 years ago as a sophomore in high school, and he aced it. Like
Oh
he was
yeah.
like, "Does this mean I'm done? Like, what does this? What does this exactly mean?" And of course, he's just messing around, but he just knows, it's not really about like getting information transfer. Like, learn as a learner, I think everybody sees that formal structure of like an example of this, right? Like I fix stuff around my house sometimes. I'm not like super handy. I didn't grow up doing that. I don't have some people just like magically know what to do and they have the tools. So I'm trying to like fix a thing around my house. Like, what do I do? Well, I go to the internet, I Google it, I find a YouTube video, I watch the YouTube video, I pause it. I will like then go to Home Depot to get the tools that are in the YouTube video, and then I will like start trying to like follow what the guy's doing in the YouTube video. I mean, the equivalent, like think if instead I was like, okay, I'm gonna go sign up for a program in like electrical or home repair or something, and I'm gonna like, here's the syllabus, and there's these lectures, and there's like homework assignments, and I'm gonna do like a whole semester so that I can like fix this one thing. I mean, there are places where there's value to that, but I think all of us have this intuition nowadays. It's like it really you learn what you need in the moment, and the world's changing so fast, and anyway, so what we want is kids that are equipped for that and that are much less deterred by these systems of gatekeepers and rules and just limits. I mean, so much of that is holding kids, into structures that are not productive for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned the handy thing, because I'm not particularly handy either, but I'm working on it. And so yeah, I mean, YouTube has always kind of been a go-to, but there was a few months ago I had to change a light fixture, and usually anything that, like, in my past, where like if it's electrical, I hire it out. Like, I don't want to shock myself. But this time I was like, screw it. And I took a picture of the light box and I put it into ChatGPT, and I was just like, here's what I'm doing. Walk me through it. And it fully walked me through just based on the pictures I sent it. So yeah, I mean, we're in a completely new learning paradigm.
Right.
It's it's fascinating to think what, the kindergartners and, Prenda, what they're going through and what it'll be like,
100%.
the next several years. Um, any particular story from either students or guides that's really resonated with you as a result of Prenda that stands out that you
So
can
I
share?
mean, so many stories. I could tell you them for a very long time. The moral of every story is this was my kid before, and it's often some version of, sitting in the car parked outside the school, the child's in tears, like, don't make me go in there every day, and that can be a variety of reasons, right? Boredom, bullying, like discouragement. There's so many things that can happen inside of a system like that, um, where you have kids that just are deeply unhappy, and then they switch, and the switch. My favorite story about the after portion is the kids crying again, actually, but they're crying because it's spring break or it's Saturday and there's no school, and if you imagine going from crying because you have to go to school to crying because you can't go to school, I mean, that's the 180 that we're talking about, and it's just so powerful. I'll share just quickly. I got brave this year and I put up my one political post on social media. Most of us are like, let's not talk about politics, and in fact, I'm so burned out on it. But there are discussions at the state level around school choice policies, and so I put an explainer and advocacy, like, this is school choice, and I kind of said, look, this is making a difference for families. And somebody that had put her son in Prenda years ago, piped into the thread, and it was a really touching moment because she was able to just say, like, look, for some people this is abstract politics. Like, for me, this is personal, and here's why. And she talked about her son and just how unhappy and how at risk he was. I mean, there were lots of problems, and by creating a new environment for him and giving him opportunity to just see himself differently as a human and as a learner, being part of this micro school group and having a learning guide that's fully invested in him and cared about him, and so to put that together for him, it was night and day contrast, and things changed, and she gave a little update. Now here he is in high school years later, and things are just going so well for him, and she really attributes so much of this to what happened to him in that micro school. That was a turning point in his life. I mean, obviously it's her as the parents, and there's so many factors that goes into that, but to be even a small part of that kind of change for a human being is humbling for me, and it's work that just energizes me every single day.
I love that. Well, I would have loved to dive a little bit deeper into the business and growth and all that, but we'll probably have to save that maybe for a round two. But
Sure.
looking forward, how do you see Prenda evolving as well as the broader education landscape over the course of the next few years?
Yeah, we have a very simple mandate right now. It's just to help deliver these services and this value to people, like help them start their own micro schools and help them be as successful as we possibly can with their micro schools. So like I said, 1,000 people starting micro schools. I think 10,000 should start micro schools. I think that should happen in the next couple of years. There are, policy questions around funding so that this doesn't isn't limited only to people that can afford thousands of dollars out of pocket. Obviously we want this to be available to everyone. So that's a potential limitation, but assuming the funding's there, I think lots of people will be interested in this, and we want to be ready for them. Our job is to make it as effective and successful as it possibly can be. So we're really focused on that. I've got a great team, and we're really grateful to just be able to do this work every single day.
Well, I'm excited to see how you continue to grow. So, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Really had a good time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Seat to Exit. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support means the world, helps us continue to grow, and bring more incredible guests onto the show. Now, for more content and updates, follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or you can check out MindHire, where we help startups build exceptional teams. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Seat to Exit.